to this next edition of RefCom webinar events. We're happy that you are joining us today. Our presentation today is by Voovio, and our presenters are Fran Montmoreau and Clint Jeffers. Fran is an operations leader with more than 30 years experience in manufacturing. He's now the Director of Operations for Voovio and helps plants capture manufacturing know-how through Voovio's digital platform. Clint is the Director of Operations and Account Management. His key career focus areas have been manufacturing, asset reliability and integrity, capital and financial prioritization, and corporate strategy. I'm going to turn this over now to Clint and Fran.
Okay, thank you, Becky. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar this morning. Clint and I are going to be talking about how our customers are using a digital subject matter expert to solve some of their manufacturing challenges. So as we get into the webinar, we want to kind of set the stage for what the industry is seeing, and then we're going to cover a brief demo of Voovio and our simulators, and then we'll talk about some case studies from our customers. So if we look at the industry and some of the challenges that the entire industry is seeing, it's really related to the significant turnover that's been going on the last 5-10 years, and the transition of the workforce, the baby boomers leaving, the millennials moving into the workforce, and the next generations moving in. And you could see some of the data here from Deloitte, but the result of this transition is a significant loss of knowledge and expertise at the plant sites. And some of the statistics showing the transition, and by 2030, over 2 million jobs will probably remain unfilled, is really challenging a lot of the plant sites and a lot of the executives on how do they manage this transition and how do they manage future business expansion and development. So let's talk some more about some of these challenges the sites are seeing in the next chart, specifically with the baby boomers leaving the workforce and the new generations moving in. What our customers are telling us, what this transition is causing them, is a significant loss of knowledge. Again, within the industry, it's referred to as tribal knowledge. It's that knowledge, those process nuances where when you need to start up the plant or bring the plant to a hot idle, it's those nuances that only a few people know. So that's challenging the plants on maintaining the high levels of production. It's creating a lot of inefficiencies with those few subject matter experts, because not only are these plants relying on those subject matter experts to keep the plant running, but those same SMEs are being asked to train the new employees in the plant process. So again, it's really taxing those subject matter experts. In addition, when a new operator is onboarded, because the plant is running and because the SME is not always available to train those operators, what we hear from customers is when an operator is qualified in their job, they're probably only knowledgeable of that job. It's probably less than 50%. We've heard numbers of 30%, 40%, because they're just not able to experience the starting up, the shutting down of equipment, et cetera. So what that leads to is we have inexperienced operators, ones that haven't seen the significant events in operation, training the next generation. So these impacts, as you can see, are significant, whether it's production losses, downtime events, even at safety and environmental incidents. So the next slide speaks to how, we rely on procedures within the industry. However, when we talk to our customers and look at some data that's out there on from different studies, most of these procedures aren't up to date or accurate. You can see the one box from the ASMC study identified 40% of the procedures are wrong. over 50% of the procedures are not followed. So that leads to a lot of misoperation and really not understanding the proper way to perform a procedure in the process. We talked to a lot of customers, and we capture their feedback. So Clint and I analyzed several customers' procedures, and the next slide shows what that analysis detailed. It gets into the problems that the industry is having with procedures I'm sure it's very common across some of your old plants, is the procedure does not reflect the operator practice in the field. Even some of our customers, it's different from shift to shift to shift, which creates a lot of, challenges with keeping the plant running and in production. Another thing we see across a lot of our customers' procedures are ambiguities and generalizations. One I like to always refer to is if the procedure says line up a pump, that is very common for a senior operator to know how to line up a specific pump. But for that operator that may not have experienced how to line up that specific pump, it may require 6, 8, 10 steps that isn't available to that operator. So it could afford him or her to perform it incorrectly. And then the last one we already spoke about, but it's the inexperience. It's just the lack of practice on those critical tasks. So what we in Voovio identify as critical for the frontline personnel is procedure clarity. And we kind of highlight that in the next slide. What that is are clear and concise actions. Think of this as a pilot's checklist. If an operator is going to perform a task, instead of those ambiguous steps or those general steps, clear, concise actions on what is supposed to occur in that next step, one action per step. And then how do you enable that operator to visualize what they are supposed to accomplish in the field? So giving them that, the ability to visualize, building that muscle memory. And then lastly, it's the learn by doing. We're going to talk a little more about learn by doing and the ability to build that muscle memory. But from here, I'm going to turn it over to Clint and let him talk about how Voovio builds that muscle memory within the operations and frontline personnel.
Thanks, Fran. I appreciate all the front end input, and exactly as you said, we've been talking a lot, and I think most people know how it is difficult to learn in a new plant. Even people that have been in manufacturing for years, like myself, I'd go to a new plant, and until I was there 6 to 12 months, really tough to contribute until you've traced all the lines, walked out the unit operations, and really understand it. So what we're going to show here is how Voovio is able to shorten that learning curve and make that material have that at their fingertips as long as they've got access to a web browser. So really just going to show you guys quick the view of the system, the simulator, what we have. So at its core, at its base, the foundation of the Voovio modules that we're going to build the simulator is the digital replica. So as you can see here, our replica starts as we walk into a unit. And you can see as I walk through, this is not a rendering. This is not a 3D scan. This is my plant, or a plant that one of you guys could work through. That is one of the advantages of having Voovio, is that we use actual photographs of the equipment, which means operators will see and touch, remember, and be familiar with the equipment that they touch every day. In addition, we've got the capability to interact with this equipment. As you can see, I'm working with this damaged hand valve here. So we can go through, move. I've got the same degrees of freedom, looking up, looking down. I can stop, look around, see my entire plant as it exists. In addition to being able to look at my plant, I can look up and search any of my valves, those valves with odd names from days gone by, right, or that have grandfathered names that may or may not make sense, or the upstream valve from wherever. We catalog and document all of the equipment in there, and it's also searchable. So you can search by a tag ID. When you select such a valve, it takes you not only to that valve in the image, but as well in the map view below. As you may have seen this map here, as I was moving, this just helps orient the operator or the user to where they would be in the plant, that would at the location that corresponds to the valve above. Again, if you don't know the tag numbers, you can search for bypass lines, and all of the list of bypass lines would come up. You can select the valve you want, and it would take you to a manifold or a piece of equipment where that valve would exist, not only in the image, but as well in the overview here. So from locating valves, especially for new people or new people to the area, or for infrequently performed actions or valves that aren't operated that frequently, you can see how this would drastically reduce time to procedure execution as well as learning for the first time operators. Another key element to Voovio, which really shortens the learning process, is what we call our enhanced views. These are extremely valuable for a lot of customers, because this is an actual use case from a customer we had, that they were training that in this area was extremely loud. They couldn't understand. So when the SME or the trainers would take the new employees to the area, train them, ask them, hey, does that make sense? Of course, everyone says yes, when they may or may not really understand it the way they need to. But as you can see here, when we talk about the way the system would work, we can easily label these lines, and it makes it much easier to see how this process would work, where these lines would be could or wouldn't be isolated, and how the whole process works in general. So you can see how something like this would really help with onboarding or troubleshooting in any event that operators would need to go out there and figure out what's going wrong. And to take that a step further, again, we can make these interactive. So we have an X-ray mode. We have our X-ray mode flows, valves that you've seen before. Here, this has valves that are able to be interacted with. So if you'll keep an eye on this flow, as I interact with these valves, I can adjust the flow. So I can practice, flow lineups, manifold arrangements, whether it be truck loading, unit startup, whatever that would be. I could sit here at a desk or in an office or with a tablet in the field just before I do it, go through those actions, go through those steps, and make sure I'm going to do that sequence I'm preparing to perform is going to be the correct sequence for the result I want to get, like I said, whether that's startup or shutdown or whatever. So again, that's just the overview of the system. Where we really bring value is in the simulators. So what that would be, we've got several different modes. And what we're able to do here is take that same simulator, that foundation, and expand on it just a little bit. So what we're going to start first is with our guided exercise. And the way I explain the guided exercise, if you can imagine, it's like having your subject matter expert, your best trainer, take a new employee or anyone new to the area or someone who hasn't performed an action before, and walk them through procedures by the hand, step by step. So just to get a view of the screen, what's going on, the items on the right, that'll look familiar. That's the replica with the map below. Now on the left, what we have is our action checklist. Like Fran talked about, was where that procedure clarity comes in. We hit all those documents. That's our pilot's checklist. So those ambiguous actions, the line up the pump, we'll break those 6 or 7 steps down into make sure your inlet valve is open, make sure there's fluid, oil in the seal pot, make sure the plug is in the offline pump. All those things that may or may not be included in the procedure will be included here with images to walk them through. Item to the bottom left would be the customer procedure, where we would index the step to that point in the procedure, as you see here. So step 1 in this one, go through, close this valve, and then I release. So the next item is another improvement where Fran mentioned tribal knowledge. So this is where we bring in our knowledge snippets. A knowledge snippet is that key information, that key item that you want somebody to know at a certain point in a procedure, right? So it can be a text like this is here, or it can be an image. It can be a link to an incident report. It can be a short video. We have customers do all of these things, but any technique or any little tips or tricks that operators we need to remember at the moment before they interact with this valve, we'd locate that here. This one just says, hey, we don't operate this valve much. We usually use a different one that accomplishes the same task. So all we do here is just ensure that the valve's open, move on to the next step. And as you can see, the system is walking the operator. I'm not touching or walking anything. It's taking that operator through step by step until they're comfortable with that procedure. So that's the front end part where you really get into it more. Okay, yeah, I can walk somebody through, but I could take a video and show somebody how to do that. How do I understand and measure knowledge? How do I get more from this than just showing or walking them through? So now to do that, we're gonna go into our test module. So now our test will actually work with the operators and see what do they know. So as you can see now, I open the module, I still have my procedure, it looks the same, but now I've got this test report. So what I'm able to do, what I must do now as an operator is I must move myself. So I have to know where these actions are. I'm allowed to make mistakes. I can select any valve I need. As you can see, I was able to walk to that first step and get it correct. Okay, well, that's nice. What happens if I make a mistake? So let's go down here. I think step 2 is to open this other valve. I'll get confused. I didn't open the knowledge snippet or remember. Oh. So immediate feedback, not waiting to get the test wrong, get my grade back the next day from the training coordinator. I get the feedback immediately here, and it says, okay, I interacted with the wrong action, with the wrong valve, didn't even look at my knowledge snippets. But since it's a simulator, I can either review, which takes me back to the guided, or I can try again. So I'll go try again. I'm gonna come back. Oh yeah, that's a knowledge snippet. It's that valve I'm not supposed to interact with. So I'm just gonna check that it's open. And again, as you can see, it identifies, okay, you got the action correct after 2 attempts. So again, everything that the operator or trainee does as they're going through this, it logs and catalogs those steps so you can track and get a procedure report at the end where you can go through and see this is how many items I've done, still haven't completed. And the training coordinator or whomever would get a copy of this report after it was assigned to the operator. Additional items we're able to do within this, and while those reports add value, is within those procedures or qualification sets, you're able to look at the overview of your staff. So here's with a certain procedure, how many people were assigned, some have not completed, some were dismissed. Here's your grade summary. I can pull up those test reports for completed tests as shown here. Some knowledge snippets weren't open, but they were trained well enough anyway. Whatever the case was, that they were able to get enough repetition that they didn't need that, maybe, I don't know. So that's one value add. Another is the actual driving a little deeper and getting your overview summary of your competency level, but also your frequency of missed actions where you identify gaps maybe in procedures or chronic training losses or gaps where people aren't understanding more than 1 or 2 occasions, which leads you to, hey, maybe we need to change something. So here's just an overview summary, a grade summary, minimum test, average scores, 2 people that didn't pass. So maybe we want to concentrate on this group here. We also have a frequency of missed actions table. So what this is able to do is direct us to the items that were missed. So this one says, okay, here are our most frequent missed actions. Let's go and see which one of those. So step 4 was missed a couple times. Let's check that one out. So I can click that link, jump in here. And again, if you remember, the test doesn't have the arrows. So I can look at this and know that, hey, in a test format without the arrow, I could easily see how someone could get these confused. So I can change those steps. I can change the valve color. I can increase labeling, do whatever we need to do a little more field hands-on training to make sure they understand the difference in these valves and can correct that the next time. So that's just a quick overview of some of the things the module's able to do. Again, we'll have questions at the end to let you guys weigh in. But as for now, I'll give it back to Fran and we'll commence with the presentation.
Okay, Clint. So again, great overview. And what this learning pyramid really points out, some folks will say that this is the new generation and how they learn, but really, most of us nowadays, we learn by doing. We learn by seeing and then doing. So reading really is no longer the norm. I think back anytime I'm working on something at the house or on my car on a weekend, I'm looking for a video to follow and to practice so I can learn by doing versus reading a procedure. So this learning pyramid really hits home with giving that operator a simulator, something they can practice. Digitizing a procedure really doesn't change the method of which they're learning. Giving them the ability to practice prior to execution really is important about building that muscle memory and affording them the opportunity to see it in the area prior to going and actually performing in the area. So with that, I'd like to jump into some case studies. We have several. We'll cover maybe 5 or 6 and then open up for questions. The first one I want to talk about is an oil refinery. It's a customer we have up in Alberta, Canada. And the challenge they were having is they were experiencing failed compressor startups, or if the compressor were to shut down, they were reliant on really one person in that unit to be available or to come to the site and lead the startup of that compressor. So a couple challenges there. The knowledge was not available for all the operators. The procedures were not clear enough for the operators to learn how to restart that compressor. And again, back to what I talked about earlier, the sheer effect on that one subject matter expert, in this case, the operations coordinator, to be available really 24/7, 365 when an event occurred. So what they asked us to do was simulate the startup and shutdown of compressors at the site in the upgrader, so then they could then leverage that knowledge across all the shifts within the unit. And they shared back with us this past year, back when they had a turnaround in the fall, that they had the shift that was on, those operators restarted the compressor without issue because they had asked the operators to practice the restart of that compressor prior to the actual day of the restart. And they had the field operator and the board operator practicing the restart. And then when it was time to execute startup, operations coordinator was not needed and the operators were able to restart the compressor. So that's one I wanted to share. The next one, it's a petrochemical company. It's based out of Alabama. And let me wait for it to pop up on the screen. There we go. Several different units. The site had implemented Voovio across multiple units. And the challenges they were facing is they were having a lot of execution errors. This had to do with practice not matching procedure. So we went in, did the photo shoot, detailed how to execute procedures, and they were able to really train the organization on the proper way to execute these procedures, avoid the production losses. You could see the significant losses they were experiencing. And they were able to, one, lock in on a standardized practice. All the operators could then practice and demonstrate competency. And then when it came time to execute in the field, they were all doing it, performing the procedures the correct way. They also shared some other benefits that they realized. They were able to onboard their operators 50% faster. They did not give up on the quality, but what they shared with us was the ability for that operator or operators to learn how to execute the procedures without relying on the trainer to be available to show them. And when the trainer was available, then it was more valuable time spent with the operator, explaining the why, answering the detailed questions versus the general questions of where equipment was or what step came first or second. The operators were able to practice that without relying on the subject matter expert. And lastly, the benefit they realized was in preparation for turnarounds, because these procedures weren't done frequently, they were able to train their operators going into a turnaround, coming out of a turnaround, how to perform those. They called some of these procedures loss of procedures, removing steam from the plant, instrument air, et cetera. So they're really realizing the benefits in multiple places, from onboarding operators to those infrequent executed procedures. The next one I want to talk about is another oil refinery in Montana. They were having a challenge with their logistics unit. They allow third-party drivers on site to perform the loading of their products. So they invited us to the site to capture the loading of the trucks. And what they are doing now is, since we are a web-based solution, before the drivers come to the site to pick up whatever load they're being asked to load at the site, that driver will go on to Voovio, practice loading of the product. Let's say it's asphalt. They will practice loading asphalt, and then they are assigned a test. And that third-party driver needs to demonstrate competency prior to being allowed on site to then pick up that load and load at the site. You can see here that the reliance on the customer operators was reduced by 75%. And in 2023, this refinery was able to train over 400 drivers on loading specific products at the site. So with that, I'll turn it over to Clint and let him cover a few of the case studies as well.
So just a quick couple more, and then we'll jump into a Q&A. Again, you can see here's a gigafactory at an automotive facility up in Austin, Texas, where they're doing some battery cell manufacturing. So their biggest challenge, a little different than others, was rapid scale increase. They're onboarding, people every week. The rapid, not so much loss of knowledge here, but limited knowledge, where you have people who may have 2 weeks to less than 2 months. 2 months would be a senior person training these newly onboarded people. Those of us in the industry know how much we knew after 2 months. So when you're losing that knowledge, you don't have the best practices that always get passed on. So that was their challenge. And so they didn't have the tools, as you can imagine, to onboard such a rapid or a massive group of people. So they were taking those 2 month, 3 month people, training those 2 people. So standardization, the rate of change here when you're adding that many people and growing and scaling a site that quickly, is the speed at which procedures and best practices are learned and then applied through procedures. That's another value add of Voovio, is that the updatability. When something changes or a procedure's modified after we've gone in and done the photo shoot, if it's as simple as a valve swap out or something like that, those changes from us can be changed as quickly as 24 to 48 hours. As far as procedure updates, if we've got the images, we can hop on a Teams call or whatever with our team, and we can get those updated, put in our learning system within a day or two as well. So the ability to increase the agility for rapid expansion or rapidly scaling businesses is another value proposition that Voovio is going to bring. It's tough to match just because of the method of which we go about in using JPEGs in our solution. So again, the Voovio solution for this customer was, we are now the standard for onboarding the new hires in the cell manufacturing area. The knowledge retention is so much. Again, if you're training people after 2 weeks, you may get to do a task or a job 1 or 2 times. So through Voovio, we're able to practice those 7, 8, 10, 20 times on some of these actions. So you really develop that retention, that practice, as Fran showed in that pyramid, to learn by doing without actually having to do that out on the shop floor, or if the asset is even ready for that step, or those actions are ready to be done. So between that and the standardization, again, that eliminating that knowledge loss of somebody who may forget something they learned 2 weeks ago, getting all the information delivered in a standardized, effective way, make sure everybody gets the information and they're able to standardize and run the way they want to. The next one, another very large chemical company down in Geismar, utilities area, was another onboarding one. The qualification was basically the trainer signed off. They walked through, they did a quick checklist, and they signed off. And then they get released on shift, and the company was still having issues with pump failure or other errors, leaks in the unit. So the competency amongst even a lot of the qualified people for some of these actions, they performed irregularly or every 3 to 4 months, was extremely low, because again, they'd had turnover, or if this is a multi-unit site, people would bid out and change units. So even if they're not leaving your company, if they're changing area of responsibility, that's also a way of turnover, even if it's not documented with the company. So what Voovio did, we were brought in, put into the onboarding curriculum for some of this key equipment for operators. We'd also do refresher training before we went and performed some of those irregular activities to eliminate the what we call the maintenance bad actors and those damages and costly repairs to the equipment. Again, and that's the same company Fran mentioned before, they repeated their achievement of 50% time reduction spent by SMEs to qualify new operators. So it's next one, Fran, I think you'll have a little more info on the nylon unit up here.
Sure. Yeah, I can cover that. So this customer, it's a specialty chemicals company, and they're running a nylon autoclave. And their challenge was they run vaporizers, and vaporizers are very reliable pieces of equipment. So the challenge they had was being able to train operators in the facility with those vaporizers running 12 to 18 months in between shutdowns. How do you train a new operator? So what they were actually doing was shutting a vaporizer down on purpose, so the operator could learn how to shut it down, start it up. And they were doing that once a month. They had to do that because prior to doing that, they had several findings on PSM audits indicating that they weren't training their operators effectively. So it led them to shutting these vaporizers down monthly. We went in, we simulated all the procedures related to these vaporizers, and they have since stopped shutting the vaporizers down, and they're able to train their operators through area walkthroughs and having them complete the simulators and have that operator demonstrate competency. So it eliminated the need for them to shut the vaporizers down. It built that operator competency and gave them the confidence they could start up and shut down the vaporizers. And this company has since moved to using the simulators as a means to demonstrate operator qualifications when it comes to the 3-year certification. So yeah, another example of multiple use cases for using Voovio in this case, in this company. Hey, Clint, since we're past 35 minutes past the hour. Why don't we stop here and see if there are any questions?
Perfect.
So if you haven't already noticed, you are able to type your question into the chat section. And you are welcome to do that at any time. Clint and Fran will answer your questions as they can.
Clint, do you want to see if there's any there? And
Yeah, let me see what I'm seeing so far. What is this? Order of magnitude, order of magnitude on costs just popped in. So we tell people we're talking tens to hundreds of thousands, depending on the scale, right? So we, if you're doing a loading, unloading, we're talking, up to 100 usually for a small loading. But we tell people you can get an effective project that'll make a difference with your team for about 150. We've done full units. Obviously, as you know, we do a full scale refinery and recovery unit is different than a small specialty chem unit. So it's hard to say without coming out there, walking through, but most full units we'll get for a few hundred K. Again, it'd be a pretty big unit. You get a lot of procedures with that. You'd be able to walk through, interact, change whatever you want. You get those enhanced views in that overview, that product description, the product flow that we showed. All that would be included in that same price. Again, with all the modules that we showed too, the guided, they're also learn, review with the test that come with that. So all that's part of the process, the system that you get when you go with Voovio. Anything to add on that one, Fran?
no, I think you covered it. It really depends on the size of the site. And as Clint mentioned, let us come to the site, let us walk it, and we can give you a pretty good estimate. One we always hear is, does it take a lot of my internal resources? And again, with Voovio, prior to me joining Voovio, I had actually implemented it at my last plant. And we are very light on the customer resource. We need very few resources. You don't need to spend any time updating your procedures before you send them to us. Part of what we do, Clint covered that in the demo, is we walk the procedure, we walk the plant with your subject matter expert, and we're going to detail every action required by that operator to perform the procedure successfully. So no need to update your procedures, and we only need that one subject matter expert. Our typical project will be on site maybe 3 days, 4 days, walking the site, capturing the pathways, walking through the procedures, and then we go away. So 2-3 days of that subject matter expert, we go away, and we'll have a couple project check-ins with that subject matter expert. Those check-ins may last 30 minutes, and that's usually 2 of those check-ins across the life cycle of the project. So minimal resource requirements, and now we're doing projects in roughly 4 months. Some of them are shorter because of the scope smaller, but rough project is about 16 weeks.
Yeah, still looking at here's one that came in through this other system item. So is Voovio compatible with the other systems we already have on the plant? The answer to that is going to be yes. Right, a lot of our customers have what they call SCORM compatible LMS systems. So we work with companies like SAP SuccessFactors, Cornerstone, and others. Most of those, anybody who uses a unified system for curriculum management, for operator onboarding, we can absolutely connect to those. You can get your scores, grading, and the completion of the operators' test performance through that. Also, if you have other links, we're open API system, so we can create what's called hotspots within the replica. So if you want to put a link to something in SAP or another database, anything that we can get through access to links, intranet links, especially when employing single sign-on, SSO, we're able to get to any system within there by just putting hotspot links within there. So I'd say yes, we can get you in and around and fully functional with any LMS or other operating system you have there on site. And here's another one, Fran, and maybe you can jump on this one. It says it's asking about the procedures. Do we need to review them and update them before we send for a quote?
Yeah, no, not at all. In fact, it'd probably be you'd be wasting your time, because what we're going to do is we're going to walk those procedures in the field with your subject matter expert. I mean, it's probably the best. We used to call them at DuPont job cycle checks that you're going to do with that procedure, because we're going to have your expert. We're going to have our engineers with your expert walking, taking notes, reading the procedure as we walk, so on. No need to update them. No need to even review them. We'll come out, do that walkthrough. And then prior to us going into production, we're going to feed that back to you so you can review that internally, follow your management of change process. And once you confirm the proper standard execution of that procedure, then we'll go into production. So, yeah, no need to review procedures prior to a project.
See, still nothing else. Anybody has anything else, please throw it in. On this last one on the other system, it's showing and Fran, you can comment on this one too. Can we update the simulators on our own, or is Voovio required to be involved to make the changes?
Yeah, so majority of the updates, absolutely. The customer can maintain and update their content. We'll provide you a tool, the authoring tool, to take care of those updates. We'll show you how to use it and help you if you run into any challenges. Again, with a lot of our customers, a lot of them start down that path of wanting to make the changes, but we also understand how resource constrained manufacturing is these days. So we are available to take care of all those changes for you. You know, Clint mentioned making those changes is very quick. If a valve or a component changes in the field, you can go out with your digital camera, your iPhone, your whatever smartphone you have, take a picture, send it to us, and we'll do a quick turn. Within 24, 48 hours, we'll update the content so your whole project is updated. So again, we can do all the updates, or we can show you how to make those changes and updates as well. However the customer wants to proceed, we'll work with them on that.
All right. Well, I'm not seeing much more. One thing we usually close with, and again, it's still open. Please weigh in with any questions that you have. We still got it open, but just to cover some of the footprint that we currently have in the globe, right? So we've got a presence in Europe, in the Middle East, as well as heavy presence. I would say through the Gulf Coast. Obviously industry specific, being the chemical industry, that makes sense. But we're definitely expanding up through Canada and up along that East Coast as well. And also as well in the Midwest, we've got some stuff queued up. So again, footprint, if we need to connect you guys with some people for references to see how they're using it, I think we can absolutely do some of that as well. So again, this is not, these aren't nobodies that are using this. We're been established. And I was talking to one of our customers yesterday. He said, I guess it's been 7 years now that we've been in that plant. So we've learned a lot and have grown. So even if you've seen Voovio before, some time back, a couple years ago. Bring us back in. You can see how we've modified and grown. We'd love to have a talk with you and show you what we're able to do.
Well, I just want to thank you both so much for joining us today. Clint, Fran, that was excellent presentation, such great information, exactly what we want with these Refining Community webinars. So, and if anyone is interested in more information about the Voovio system, please reach out to Clint and Fran. The next webinar that the Refining Community will offer will be on February 14th with Art and V on their ECHO system. So it's ECHO as a zero emission process in delayed coking units. I am searching for a presenter for the March webinar. So if you have anything to share, please reach out to me. And we hope that you will join us in the future. And so if there are no more questions, I will go ahead and close. And thank you all so much for joining, and have a safe day.
Thank you, Becky.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.